I never thought the moment my family would finally acknowledge me would also be the moment I walked away from them forever. For most of my life, I imagined that day of something warm and healing, like a long overdue apology wrapped in love. Instead, it arrived cold and sharp, buried beneath the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles at our Thanksgiving table, in a house that looked perfect and always had. The house hadn't changed since I was a child. The same cream-colored walls, the same carefully chosen decorations, the same unspoken rule that appearances mattered more than feelings. The long dining table was overflowing with food: golden turkey, stuffing spilling from its dish, mashed potatoes whipped smooth, cranberry sauce glowing under the lights. Laughter filled the room, casual and loud, the kind that convinced anyone watching that this was a happy, close family. The conversation, as usual, revolved around my younger sister, Lily. My mother was glowing, retelling Lily's September wedding for what felt like the 100th time. Every detail mattered to her: the designer dress, the imported flowers, the string quartet, the guest list so massive it needed months of planning. She spoke with pride, as if Lily's wedding were her own personal achievement. My father nodded along, carving the turkey with intense focus, like staying busy was safer than actually engaging. Lily sat quietly, sipping her wine, eyes lowered, perfectly comfortable being the center of attention without needing to say a word. I sat across from her, smiling when expected, nodding when required, already feeling like a ghost in the room. Then my mother tapped her glass. The sound was sharp and deliberate, cutting through the room instantly. Every conversation stopped. I knew that smile. I'd seen it my entire life, right before she redirected attention exactly where she wanted it. "Lily's wedding was just wonderful," she said loudly, basking in the moment. Then she turned toward me, still smiling. "So, Kat, when's yours?" The table erupted in laughter. It wasn't cruel, that was the worst part. It was easy, familiar laughter, like this question was a harmless joke everyone had permission to enjoy. My father didn't look up from the turkey. Lily didn't react at all. Something inside me hardened. I slowly set my fork down. The clink against the plate echoed louder than it should have. The laughter faded, replaced with a silence so thick it felt heavy. "I already had mine," I said calmly. My mother blinked, confused. "Had what?" "My wedding," I replied, 6 months ago, in June. The room froze. My father stopped carving. Lily's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. My dad was the first to speak, his voice low and uncertain. "Kat, we never got any invitations." I nodded, almost gently. "I figured you'd say that." I reached into my bag and placed my phone in the center of the table. The screen lit up, reflecting shock across every face. And in that moment, I knew there was no going back. But to understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to understand my childhood. We grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood with a white picket fence and neighbors who waved politely. Appearances were everything in our family. Perfect family photos, perfect milestones, perfect stories to tell friends. And in every one of those stories, Lily was the star. She was born 2 years after me, but from the beginning, she mattered more. Her baby photos filled albums. Mine were shoved into drawers. When we both got new clothes, Lily's outfits were photographed and framed. Mine were folded away without comment. When Lily started dance classes at 5, the living room wall became a shrine: trophies, ribbons, recital photos arranged carefully. When I won a science fair in middle school, my mom smiled politely and said, "That's nice, honey." Then she asked if I could help take pictures of Lily in her new cheer uniform because the lighting was perfect that afternoon. I wasn't neglected in obvious ways. I had food, clothes, and a roof over my head, but emotionally, I was invisible. My mother poured everything into Lily. My father enabled it quietly. He was always tired, always working late, but somehow he never missed Lily's events. My orchestra concerts were always next time. My debate tournaments were sorry, kiddo. But Lily's prom send-off, he took the entire day off. So I adapted. I learned not to ask. I learned to be easy. I learned to take up less space. I got straight A's quietly. I joined clubs that didn't require parents. I celebrated my achievements alone, telling myself this was normal, that families just worked this way, that someone had to be low maintenance. By high school, the favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. Lily got a brand new car at 16. I got her old one. Her college applications became a family project, edited and discussed at dinner. Mine were completed alone late at night. When I earned a scholarship for environmental science, my mom hugged me briefly and said, "That's great." Then she asked if I could help Lily shop for senior pictures. Something inside me hardened that day. And sitting at that Thanksgiving table years later, staring at my phone between us, I realized that hardness hadn't broken me. It had prepared me. College was the first time in my life that I felt like I could breathe. For the first time, I existed somewhere where my family couldn't constantly compare me to Lily, couldn't shrink me into the background, couldn't remind me, directly or indirectly, that I mattered less. I chose environmental science because it felt meaningful, because it let me focus on problems bigger than my family, and because it gave me an identity that was entirely my own. I worked hard, but quietly. That habit never left me. I earned good grades, built relationships with professors, and found comfort in labs, data, and long hours of research. When I came home for holidays, my parents asked the same vague questions they always did. How's school? Busy? And before I could answer fully, the conversation drifted back to Lily, her social life, her plans, her future. After graduation, I accepted a job in Seattle with a nonprofit that analyzed water quality and environmental impact. It wasn't flashy, it didn't sound impressive when my parents told their friends, but it mattered. Every report, every data set felt like something real, something that made a difference. Moving 3 hours away felt like freedom. Distance softened the constant ache of being overlooked. That's where I met Ethan. At first, he was just another colleague, tall, kind-eyed, with an easy laugh that made stressful days lighter. But he noticed things about me that no one ever had. He remembered that I brought my own coffee mug because I hated unnecessary waste. He noticed I stayed late not because I was told to, but because accuracy mattered to me. When I spoke, he listened. When I finished, he didn't rush to fill the silence. We started talking during coffee breaks, then dinners, then weekends sharing hikes, or sitting quietly, sharing thoughts that felt safe to say out loud. Being with him didn't feel like performing. It felt like resting. Meeting his family changed something deep inside me. His parents asked real questions, not polite ones, not surface-level ones. They wanted to know what my work meant to me, why I cared so much, what I hoped to change. His mom remembered things I mentioned months earlier. His dad debated environmental policy with me like my opinion carried weight. They hugged me like they meant it. No comparisons, no competition, no measuring me against someone else. For the first time, I understood what unconditional acceptance felt like. When Ethan proposed on a foggy morning in June near the water, it felt simple and right. No audience, no performance, just the two of us, mist rolling in, the quiet sound of waves, and a ring chosen with intention. Ethical diamond, recycled gold. Everything about it reflected who we were. We planned a small wedding, intimate, 50 people, a coastal chapel, flowers from a local florist, furu from vendors we loved, a playlist we made together. Nothing extravagant, nothing designed to impress strangers, just people who mattered. And despite everything, I invited my family. Some part of me still hoped they would choose me, hoped they would show up and finally see me happy. I designed the invitations myself, elegant but simple. I triple-checked every address. I sent them priority mail with signature required. I tracked every package obsessively. When the delivery confirmations came in, my heart lifted. All delivered, all signed for, by Lily. I waited for responses. Days passed, then weeks, no calls, no texts, no congratulations. I told myself excuses. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they'd surprise us. Maybe something had gone wrong. The wedding came and went. It was beautiful, emotional, full of love. Ethan's parents cried during our vows. Friends toasted us late into the night, and not one member of my family was there. Afterwards, the silence continued. I called my mom. Voicemail. I texted my dad. Busy. Talk later. The family group chat stopped showing my messages. Then I realized I wasn't getting notifications at all. One night, sitting on the kitchen floor while Ethan held me, I said the words I'd been afraid to say. What if they never got the invitations? Ethan didn't dismiss it. He didn't tell me I was overthinking. He helped me check everything again. The tracking, the delivery confirmations, the signatures. Then he suggested checking the old family email account, the one my mom set up years ago, the one Lily mostly managed. Using an old password I remembered, we logged in. And there it was, my wedding announcement email, opened from the home IP address, then moved to trash, then permanently deleted. The timestamp matched the day the invitations were delivered. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had deliberately hidden it, and I knew exactly who. Thanksgiving was approaching. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to disappear quietly, the way I always had. But another part of me was done be erased. If this was the end, it would be on my terms. So I went. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and cold, the kind of weather that made the house smell warmer than it felt. I almost turned back twice on the drive over. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, my chest heavy, but something inside me refused to back down. I wasn't going there to be invisible. I wasn't going there to smile politely. I was going there because the truth deserved daylight. When I walked into the house, everything looked exactly the same as it always had. The same decorations, the same forced cheer, the same sense that I was stepping into a play where my role had already been written. Lily and her new husband, Ryan, were posing for photos near the fireplace. My mother hovered nearby, adjusting Lily's hair, narrating wedding details to anyone who would listen. No one asked how I was. No one mentioned that I'd been gone for months. We sat down for dinner. I took the seat directly across from Lily. Conversation flowed effortlessly, but not toward me. Lily's honeymoon, Lily's new house, Lily's job promotion. My dad chimed in when needed. My mom filled every silence. I ate quietly, listening, watching, feeling oddly calm, like I was already standing outside the moment, observing it rather than being hurt by it. Then my mother tapped her glass. The question came, the laughter followed, and I answered. When my dad said they never got invitations, I didn't feel anger. I felt certainty. That was the moment I'd been preparing for, even if I hadn't admitted it to myself. I unlocked my phone and slid it forward. Delivered April 23rd, I said, keeping my voice steady. Priority mail, signature required. I zoomed in on the screen. 4 deliveries, 4 signatures. All signed by Lily. My mother's face drained of color. My dad leaned closer, squinting like the truth might blur if he stared hard enough. Ryan shifted in his seat, suddenly very interested. Lily didn't look at the phone. "She doesn't remember that," she said flatly. "I grab the mail sometimes." I swiped again. Here's the tracking history, timestamps, same day, same address. My dad shook his head slowly. "This has to be a mistake." "It's not," I said. "Here's the email." I opened the activity log. My wedding announcement. Opened, deleted, permanently removed, all from the house IP address. Silence swallowed the table. My mom laughed nervously. "Why would Lily do that? That's ridiculous." I looked directly at Lily. "Because my wedding was in June, yours was in September. You couldn't let mine exist first." Lily's head snapped up. Her eyes were sharp now, no longer calm. "You're twisting this. You always do this. You make everything about you." "I didn't hide anything. You did." Her face flushed. "You don't understand what it's like. Everything comes so easily to you. You never need help. You just exist quietly and make everyone feel guilty for not giving you more." The words hung in the air. No one spoke. In that moment, something shifted. The pieces clicked together. Her jealousy, her resentment, her need to control attention. My quiet strength had never been invisible to her. It had threatened her. My dad finally spoke. "If we'd known, we would have come." I let out a soft laugh. "Would you? You missed my recitals, my competitions, my graduations, unless Lily had something the same week." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We did our best." "For Lily," I said gently. "For me, you did what was convenient." Lily started crying. Ryan stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. My parents looked stunned, caught between guilt and denial. I stood up. "I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came here because I'm done being erased. You didn't miss my wedding. You chose not to be there." My dad stood halfway. "Kat, wait." "No," I said. "This is me choosing me." I walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one followed. The door closed softly behind me. Outside, the cold air hit my face. I took a deep breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Ethan was waiting in the car. When he saw me, he didn't ask questions. He just opened his arms, I climbed in, and we drove away in silence. It wasn't heavy silence. It was peaceful. And as the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I knew something was over, and something better had already begun. The days after Thanksgiving felt strangely quiet, like the world had exhaled after holding its breath for years. I woke up the next morning expecting to feel regret or panic or even grief, but instead there was a calm I had never known before. The truth was finally out, and it no longer lived inside my chest like a weight I had to carry alone. Ethan didn't push me to talk. He made coffee the way I liked and let the silence be gentle. When I finally spoke, it wasn't in tears or anger. It was in facts. What happened, what was said, what I chose. Saying it out loud made it feel real and final. A week passed before anyone from my family reached out. The first message came from Lily. It was long, emotional, and carefully written. She said she was sorry. She said she'd been overwhelmed planning her wedding. She said she hadn't meant for things to go so far. She admitted she'd felt threatened, overshadowed, scared of losing attention. She said she's starting therapy and trying to understand why she'd done what she'd done. I read it twice. I didn't respond right away. An apology didn't erase years of quiet erasure. Understanding her motives didn't undo the choice she'd made. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself not to rush into forgiveness just to keep the peace. My dad called next. His voice was hesitant, unsure. He said he was proud of me, that he wished he'd been more present, that he didn't realize how much he'd missed. He asked if we could talk soon, maybe get coffee. I told him I needed time. My mom didn't call. She didn't text. Days turned into weeks, and her silence said more than any apology ever could. For once, it didn't shatter me. It clarified things. I started setting boundaries, something that felt foreign and uncomfortable at first. I muted family group chats. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped justifying my feelings. I chose what contact looked like instead of accepting whatever scraps were offered. Life slowly filled in the space where pain used to sit. It became easier to focus on. I took on new projects. I traveled for site research and stood by rivers and coastlines, reminded that some things heal with time and distance. Evenings were spent cooking with Ethan, walking our dog, planning small trips. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt safe. Holidays came and went without my family, and each one hurt a little less. Ethan's parents invited me in without questions or expectations. They never made me feel like I was borrowing space. They made it clear I belonged. One evening, months later, I found the physical wedding invitation in the mail. My dad had sent it back to me with a short note. He'd found it hidden in Lily's old room while cleaning. Final proof, as if I needed it. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. Lily reached out again eventually, softer this time, less defensive, more honest. We spoke briefly, carefully. I could hear the work she was doing, the discomfort she was sitting with. I told her I hoped therapy helped. I told her I wasn't ready to rebuild anything yet. She said she understood. For the first time, I believed her. Time kept moving forward, the way it always does, indifferent to family drama, and with each passing month, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't replaying conversations in my head. I wasn't wondering what I should have said differently. I had said enough. One afternoon, sitting by the water with Ethan, watching the tide move in and out, I realized I no longer needed my family to validate my life. I didn't need them to show up late or apologize or finally see me. I had already chosen myself. The version of me who stayed quiet to survive had grown into someone who could walk away to thrive. That strength hadn't appeared overnight. It had been built slowly, through years of being overlooked, through learning how to stand alone, through finally recognizing my own worth. Walking away didn't mean I hated them. It meant I loved myself enough to stop accepting less. I still think about that Thanksgiving sometimes, the moment the room went silent, the moment truth replaced pretense. It no longer hurts. It feels like a turning point, the exact second my life shifted direction. I didn't lose my family that night. I found my freedom. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you don't trade it back for comfort, tradition, or blood ties that only exist on paper. You build something better, something real, something chosen. I used to believe closure came from apologies, from conversations that wrapped everything up neatly, from people finally admitting they were wrong. Now I know better. Closure comes when you stop waiting. It arrives quietly, the moment you realize you're no longer arranging your life around someone else's blindness. After Thanksgiving, after the silence settled, I stopped checking my phone with that familiar knot in my stomach. I stopped wondering if today would be the day my mom finally reached out. I stopped measuring my worth by who showed up and who didn't. The waiting ended, and with it, something inside me loosened its grip. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Some nights were still heavy. Certain songs still made my throat tighten. Family stories still surfaced at unexpected moments. But the pain no longer controlled me. It passed through instead of settling in. Ethan noticed the change before I did. One evening, as we cleaned up dinner, he said I laughed differently now, freer, like I wasn't holding anything back. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd been shrinking for years just to fit into a family that never made space for me. I began telling the truth more often, not dramatic truth, just honest truth. When people asked about my family, I no longer edited the story to protect them. I didn't overshare, but I didn't lie. I learned that silence doesn't always mean strength. Sometimes it just means fear. I also learned something surprising. Walking away didn't turn me bitter. It softened me. Without the constant pressure to prove myself, I had more patience, more compassion, more room for joy. I stopped seeing myself as the forgotten one and started seeing myself as someone who survived something quietly difficult. Months later, I ran into an old family friend at a grocery store. She smiled warmly and asked how my wedding had been. I told her it was small and beautiful. She hesitated, then said she was sorry my parents hadn't talked about it much. For the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed or defensive. I just said it was exactly what it needed to be, and I meant it. There was a time when that wedding felt like evidence of rejection. Now it feels like proof of alignment. The people who needed to be there were there. The people who chose me showed up. That was enough. I still hear from my dad occasionally. Our conversations are careful but real. He's trying in his own imperfect way. I accept what he can give without expecting more. Lily and I exist at a distance that feels healthy, not hostile, not close, just honest. My mom remains silent, and that silence no longer defines me. I used to think being strong meant enduring, staying, hoping. Now I know being strong sometimes means leaving without slamming the door, without screaming, without trying to make anyone understand, just leaving. There is a particular kind of grief that comes with realizing your family will never be who you needed them to be. But there is also freedom in that acceptance. You stop chasing something that doesn't exist and start building something that does. I built a life where love isn't conditional, where attention isn't a competition, where my joy doesn't threaten anyone else's benefit. I built it slowly, intentionally, with people who meet me where I am instead of asking me to be smaller. Sometimes I think about the girl I used to be, the one who sat quietly at dinner tables, the one who learned not to expect too much, the one who celebrated her own wins in private because it was safer that way. I wish I could reach back and tell her this version of life was waiting, that she would one day stop apologizing for existing, that she would choose herself and not feel guilty about it, that walking away would hurt, but staying would hurt more. If you're listening to this and it feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know something. You're not imagining it. Favoritism leaves marks even when it's subtle. Being overlooked changes you, even if no one ever names it. And you are not wrong for wanting more than scraps. You don't need a dramatic confrontation to choose yourself. You don't need proof everyone agrees. You don't need permission. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is quietly build a life that no longer revolves around people who refuse to see you. Family isn't defined by blood or tradition or shared last names. It's defined by presence, by effort, by who shows up when it matters, and who doesn't disappear when the spotlight isn't on them. Walking away wasn't revenge. Thriving afterward was. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've chosen distance to protect your peace, you're not alone. Share where you're listening from. Share your story if you feel safe to. Sometimes saying it out loud is the first step towards freedom. And if you want more real stories about family betrayal, quiet strength, and choosing yourself when it's hardest, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this coming, and you won't want to miss them. Thank you for listening. Sometimes the ending isn't reconciliation. Sometimes the ending is peace.